Joel Berman reading the short story Tramedy. Face it, there's enough tragedy in the world. Millions dying of sickness and starvation, poverty, sexual abuse, pedophilia, mass murders. Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey. I could go on and on. Why must we continue this into the arts? Music, theater, ballet, film, opera. Why must we be subjected to tragedy when a mere whisk of the pen could sweep away sadness and create a happy ending? I have decided to create different endings for the most famous tragic artistic events produced in the last 500 years, and hope these can be introduced into their respective stories. Theatergoers can return home uplifted and cheerful rather than saddened by what has transpired. Of course, the one that comes to mind first is the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, a play which has inspired hundreds of similar stories, operas, and musical pieces. This one is rife for a change of the final scene. Audiences go home much happier if the final scene showed the two star-crossed lovers becoming uncrossed. The poison was weak and only made them sick, and when they were found by the friar, they were given the antidote and both were resuscitated. They leave arm in arm to lead a happily married life with 6 children and 12 grandchildren. Then there is Aida, dying enclosed in a tomb with Radames. No, they find air seeping into the back of the tomb, and Radames scrapes away at the wall and eventually frees them, and they escape to Ethiopia, where they lead a happy life and sing duets for the rest of their 50 years, along with their 6 children and 12 grandchildren. Tosca goes to the parapet where her lover, Caravadozzi, is shot and allegedly killed, but he's been given a Kevlar jacket and awakens to find Tosca about to leap off the parapet. He joins her and they jump into a waiting net provided by a visiting circus, travel to Holland incognito, and have 6 children and 12 grandchildren. How many times do we need to see Mimi die of tuberculosis in La Boheme? No. She is sick, and her friends sell their clothing and coats to purchase isoniazid and rifampin, which cures the disease. Rodolfo and Mimi marry, have 6 children and 12 grandchildren, and live for another 50 years in absolute bliss. Now, aren't you feeling better already? Here are a few more. Remember the line, "Love means never having to say you're sorry"? Right. Eric Siegel's smarmy 1970 movie love story Takeoff on Romeo and Juliet, with Ryan O'Neal and Ali MacGraw, where MacGraw's character, according to reporter Vincent Canby, gets more beautiful until she finally dies of some vague Elizabeth Arden treatment. She should have been taken to a Swiss health spa where, after drinking water from Lourdes, having breast implants and liposuction, she recovered and married her lover. They have 6 children and 12 grandchildren, and then more lipo and new implants and live happily ever after. Now that's a good movie ending. How about Swan Lake? Lovely music by Tchaikovsky, but a sad ending after which the audience wants to cry. Odette, the white swan, and von Rothbart die at the end. Of course there has to be a sham death so that we can see and hear the final movement with the famous dying swan episode. But after that, Deus Ex Machina should appear from the clouds, reviving the two, and then they do a beautiful pas de deux off stage and have 6 baby swans and 12 grand swanlings, or whatever grandchildren swans are called. Are you getting the picture? Good, let's continue. Face it, that little duckling Sonia doesn't have to die in Peter and the Wolf. A little ipecac by the hunters, and up comes Sonia. So she has some gastric juice and spit on her, so what? It's a lovely ending as the wolf is carried away alive by a Save the Wolves group to live out a pleasant life in the Moscow Zoo. A Tale of Two Cities doesn't have to end like that. Sidney Carton doesn't have to have his head chopped off. At the last minute, after having said his famous line, "It is the far better thing that I do," etc., etc., The guillotine breaks down. He's returned to his cell and escapes with the jailer's daughter to live happily ever after in England, where they too have 6 children and 12 grandchildren. Then there's Hamlet. My God, by the end of the day, we have the death of Polonius, the king, the queen, Ophelia, Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, Laertes, and finally Hamlet. What kind of example is this setting for our children? At least let Hamlet and Ophelia live and get married so they can have... I won't say it. Briefly, Anna Karenina doesn't have to die under the train. She will be saved at the last minute by Vronsky and runs off with him. And Nick Goose Bradshaw doesn't have to die in Top Gun. He's wounded, okay? And parachutes to safety. And similarly, the captain of the Orca in Jaws could just lose a leg to the shark and end up with a wooden leg and be called Captain Pegleg. Our children would be happier. There would be less real-life tragedy and happier people.